Hello, everybody. Good morning. My name is Alyssa Cohn. I'm a columnist from Inc. I'm also the author of From Startup to Grown Up. And I'm so excited about this panel and to welcome my esteemed panelists right here, Christal Bemont, Mada Seghete, and Jager McConnell. We're excited to talk to you because what we have noticed, as Jane just said, that SaaS has really been an incredible adopter and accelerator. And during the pandemic, I think we all recognized that there's been a massive acceleration of so many of the trends we were already seeing, really SaaS being at the epicenter of all of that. So we're going to explore those concepts today. And Jager, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to ask you, what are some of the ways that SaaS is driving disruption in the ways that people work and sort of the workplace scenario overall? Lay the table for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, there's been a lot of disruption as people move to the sort of remote first sort of mind frame. And you know, there's a number, there's probably more than I can count of how many ways things have been disrupted. Obvious things like we went from a company prioritized mind frame to an individual. So it's not now what's best for the company, it's now what's best for the individual, right? How do you work best? Do you have to be somewhere when you have to pick up kids? That's okay. That flexibility has changed a lot. That's sort of one of the obvious ones. Benefits was another one, right? Benefits are now totally different. Now ping pong tables and lunches aren't a thing. So now what benefits do make sense, right? It might be childcare, or it might be help make your home office work better, like whatever it happens to be. You know, as we, so some of the less obvious ones, you know, as you move away from the office needs, now you decrease the office space you need. Now you're down to we're down to like a sixth of what we used to be. That disrupts the commercial real estate space. Residential real estate has now changed, so that now that's pushing down the sort of, as people go and move everywhere else, they're going and buying houses. That pushes actually low-income families out because now there's hyperinflation caused by that, which is changing how they work, which is interesting. Funding is changing. Right now, investors can't just stay in Silicon Valley. They have to be looking globally as far as how they're going and making investments. Yeah. That's a huge deal. Then you think about diversity, right? If everyone can move anywhere, that means you can hire anywhere. So you can't say it's a pipeline problem. You can literally hire anywhere in the world. You know, you can literally hire in Africa. You know, like this. Right. There just isn't a pipeline problem anymore if the companies prioritize it. And then the last is culture, right? Culture has been disrupted in a very powerful way where we can't connect in the same way, and that's changing how we have to think about building your culture. You might have had a good culture before, now it's getting worse, almost inevitably, because the new people coming in have never worked with the people that used to have experienced the good culture. Right. So all those things are changing how we think and how we move forward.
And Jager said everything has changed. Yeah. That's what you just said.
Yeah, basically everything.
Yeah, everything. I was going to say, so everything as relates to the workforce and the employees and the way you engage with them and the way you need to think about building culture and building cohesion internally. Mada, what have you noticed about adoption rates of your customers? What have you noticed on the outside of the workplace walls, or virtual walls, as it were?
Yeah, so Branch works with mobile apps to help build better experiences and better measurement. So we have been watching mobile, and one really interesting thing that has happened is mobile has been booming. We used to go into customer meetings and we used to try to explain the importance of having an app. We said, hey, you know, like the app is important, and many big brands had apps, but they weren't that important. And the apps were actually owned by other companies, and they worked with agencies, and now they brought these apps in-house, and everything is mobile first. And consumers are using mobile so much more today, and things that used to be done in person are now moving to digital. And many times to mobile, and there's like, oh, you know, I don't want to check in by meeting a person, so I'm going to check in on my phone and just go to my room directly. And there's all these automation and all these things. Imagine QR codes, right? Like Branch has a product that allows you to have a QR code with a link. And we've had that for like 6 years, and only people in Asia used it. Now it's one of our most requested features because customers are now everyone, my mother, my grandmother, everyone uses QR codes. So we've seen not just a change in the way we build companies, but also in the way consumers interact with technology. And there's been this acceleration that I believe is building a lot of momentum and opportunity in the market.
Yeah, in terms of the way both consumers sort of use your products and also then what you can measure around them.
I mean, there's a lot of opportunity to create new businesses around remote work, around adoption of like technology. People are, digital ads have for the first time surpassed TV ads in the way how much people spend. So the world is changing and there's this acceleration to digital.
Right, and the acceleration to digital also has some concerns and some downsides. What are your concerns or maybe the warning signs around the sort of wholesale uptake of a SaaS model, Christal?
Well, I think there are a number of things, and Jager, you said it. It's, we have to have flexibility is one of the core principles now, and optionality. But really, when you think about everything he talked about is really health of our employees and taking care of people. And there's kind of this, not only inflection point, but intersection I see happening where the requirements to help our employees stay productive means that we have to make data and information and systems and network more accessible in places that we've never had to, in ways we never had to. And with flexibility and optionality comes responsibility. And at Talend, we focus on data health. And you think about there's two critical assets within a company, your employees and your data. Every company now relies on data more than ever, but there is this intersection where now making it available in a way that becomes an opportunity can also be a liability and can also be risk. And there's a delicate balance of that. And I think just from you said it really well in that there's new opportunities, but also I look at it and say, there's also new risk. And it's been eye-opening to me that we don't have a way to measure that risk in terms of health of data, which is a really important asset. But I think it's one of those things that SaaS brings companies to life, but SaaS is only as good as the data that feeds it and that powers it.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's very wise in terms of, again, like the way the customers are seeing it and maybe also their concerns that we don't always see in our utopian world.
Yeah.
And Jager, I want to come back to something you talked about, which is about culture and maintaining culture. And I know that when we spoke just a few days ago, you really talked about Crunchbase as like a mission, that people are really focused around the mission. Could you talk about that and how you've used it to sort of somehow augment and amplify culture? And then I'd love to hear from the other two panelists about how you see culture now in your own experiences of remote work or hybrid work.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to think about how you're differentiating your company, right? Why would someone work at your company and someone else's company? It can't just be about money. So for us, like we think about how do we give back? How do we use this channel? We have 80 million people using Crunchbase. How do we give back to the community? And that powers a lot of employee loyalty, honestly. They're like, I see the good that we're doing in the world. We're raising issues around diversity. We're helping people see that there's major problems in our industry, and that helps us fix it. That's important. We help connect opportunities to one another. Like those things get people excited. They get fired up to be a part of that story. And that's a big part of how we operate. Back to something you were saying earlier is we have to focus in our own culture on trust. We have to trust that you're actually working when you say you're going to work. There's no more like, well, it's 9 to 5. Like that's gone. Some people work in all sorts of different ways. There's just that culture of trust is super important within Crunchbase, and those are some of the reasons why people will stay rather than leave.
Right, even in the sort of great resignation, right, ethos.
Right.
Crystal, you came into Talend at the beginning of the pandemic, essentially.
I did.
Right?
Yes.
So tell us what that was like for you. Sort of you probably had a little, well, tell us your experience there, and then also how you were able to navigate and lead during this time of disruption.
Well, I mean, this is a great example. This was a sold out event, and I think people really crave being with other people and energy, and I certainly do. And there's never a more important time than when you're learning about the culture that already existed before you, the great people that built a foundation before you, and that's really important to establish a starting point from. And so it was definitely disappointing for me, and something that I've struggled with just now getting back out on the road. All that said, it just means that the communication and the way that you take care of people, which is something that's very important to me, is when we set out and knew that COVID was hitting, there were a lot of things we didn't know, but we built basically a foundation that said, how are we going to make decisions? And we basically said there's 3 pillars. are mental, physical, and financial health, and all three are important. And that means that the employee is the first two of those. But the third one's important to our employees because I made a commitment not to have any furloughs, any layoffs, or to impact anyone, because I know people are depending on others to make sure that they put food on the table or to live the life that they need to. So it's a really critical thing. And for me, getting back out on the road and being able to see and be with people again is something that's long overdue. But there's nothing you can replace with face-to-face time. You just can't. And I come from a position of working 15 years at a company remote. So this is not new to me, but it's something, so I know how to orchestrate a conversation and movement that you need to have done, but you can't replace the physical presence and energy of being with people. So it's been difficult, but I think what Jager said is right. I don't think we go back. Once you see something, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things that I've experienced where it's possible to have things happen in a remote environment, now a lot of other people have seen it out of necessity as well. And I think that's a blessing to what you said, and that there's a lot of great opportunities in that.
Yeah.
But there's no way we're going back.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
totally
Employees
true.
have spoken.
Yeah.
And I get it, because I was there. I'm there. You need to live a big life, and you can't just walk in the door and be everything to your company and then think everything else gets left behind.
Right.
You have to support them.
Right,
So-
absolutely. Mada, I know that you see yourself in some ways as a steward, as a leader, as a steward of your people, and also that you're also a podcaster. So, you've thought a lot about communicating. So I'm just curious, how have you maybe changed your way of communicating with employees? And also, how have you grown as a leader in this sort of difficult time?
I really think it's been really hard. I think we were very much an in-person culture. The year before COVID, we have I have about 12 international offices, and I spent time, I think, in almost each one of them the year before. I traveled so much. It was so important for me to be in person with people. So COVID was really hard. And I think we had to take a step back and really think what makes us different. We also did I think we've always talked about our mission and why we're doing Branch. But I think one thing that we really drilled down during COVID is, what do we give people? I think similar to what you said. So I actually interviewed like 40 people in the company. We had about 10 people come back actually during the Great Resignation, which was really interesting. So I interviewed them. Why would you?
They resigned someplace else.
Yeah, they were somewhere else. They were a branch, then they left, then they came
resigned.
back.
Yeah.
So I was like, why did you come back? Why? So it was like very interesting to learn what people found valuable in our company and what they found that was different.
What did you learn?
There were like three main things. One was people felt that they could grow. So we give people a lot of opportunities to put them out of their comfort zone. And I think sometimes people don't take that for granted. And when they realize it's actually not that common to see that amount of growth, they really like that. The second one was this idea, the people and how supported they feel. So, I think we're a company that is very, very driven. But what was very different, someone came from Facebook, for example, that she said that people are driven by the Facebook, people weren't as supportive of each other. And last, we have a very big mission. We touch every person with a phone on the planet, so people liked, this idea of winning. So we have this motto, build, grow, win. So you can build the best work of your career, you can grow, and then you can win all by being supported. But we spent a lot of time on that because it is a time when people are leaving, and we wanted to be very clear of what you get and how it is working at Branch. And when you come in and you interview, you don't think this is a different place than what you're going to get after your interview. So it was less about coming up with it and more about describing it, interviewing, trying to understand what it is, and making sure that we communicate it very well to new people.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time on that. When I think about my growth as a leader, I had to really go out of my way to find places to learn. So I joined this network called YPO. I have a group of female founders I'm friends with, and I started spending more time with them. It was a lot harder to find those places to learn, and even getting feedback from my team. I think I used to get a lot more of it, so now I had to really go out of the way to ask people to give me feedback. And I had to really tried to build a safe space. I noticed that it became a lot harder for people to give feedback for each other because the trust that Jager was talking about, while it's there, if you haven't been in person with someone, it's a lot harder to build that trust, and then you just meet them for the first time in person and you're going to give them feedback. I actually did that recently. It didn't go there well. So now I'm learning that, hey, I have to first build trust with another leader before I go and I give him feedback on something. So it's been very interesting, a very interesting experience.
Yeah. I really think as I hear you and everybody talk, it's like the contract with our employees has changed quite a bit. And it's like the things that companies now offer are so different from just ping pong tables or like free lunch and whatnot. And I think it requires something different from leaders to be able to both discern, understand what that is, and then serve that up in a regular kind of way, in a sort of an overall way. Jager, have you found, I guess I would ask you, have you thought about the way you train your employees differently, also train your leaders or bring your leaders together?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a lot of things that change. That flexibility at the individual level makes it very hard as a company to come up with universal strategies that apply to everyone. What working hours do you have when everyone's working all over the world? How do you have a meeting where it makes sense for everyone? Like, that's a challenge. There's how do you give feedback to one another? It's just, it goes on and on of just how do you come up with a unified set of principles that somehow manages the team. So the short answer is, it's a hard problem. I don't know if I have the right answers here. We're still learning as we're going, and we're trying to figure it all out. But if you have people working different hours, you have people taking different approaches, different priorities. I mean, even office space itself. I've got extroverts and introverts. Introverts don't want to come in. Extroverts do. So what do I do? Like, well, I guess I have small little offices all over the place rather than one big office where I try to get everyone together. It's just it's a hassle, but it's just the new normal. It's the thing you must do now to differentiate.
Right, and it
equate
continues
this,
to go.
Elisa, to having, if anyone's had kids, and you walk out of the hospital, this is just a mental image, you walk out of the hospital and you literally go, oh my God, they entrusted me with this child and I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, and where's the book? And it's every day you're like, well, that's a new thing, I've never done that before, I've never had to figure that out, and every day is a constantly new thing, and you feel in some ways ill-equipped to know, like, because there's nothing to base it on that anyone's ever gone through, and you're trying to be flexible but yet have critical mass. And I think something you said really struck a chord with me, because I've just now been back out sitting with my team. And one thing I didn't realize is the words and the sentiments and the concepts that are communicated through Zoom or on a conference call do not land in a way that you can go to that second and third level of communication. And that's with either feedback is what made me think of that, or even with, as you're thinking about, we're in a very disruptive place right now in our organization where we're really leaning into the maximum value that we can bring to companies that are trying to be data-driven. That disruption is intentional and strategic, and but has big implications on how people think and what they do. And I just realized, being back in person with people, that there were just details around that do not transfer. It's really interesting to see that. It's very eye-opening.
It's very eye-opening. I like the way you say details, because it's the sort of nuances that we don't pick up in the same way.
Right.
Great discussion. So I'm going to put you on the spot for predictions. Christal, I'm going to start with you. What is the prediction you have for the future about where we're going in terms of business models or ways of working, or both?
It's not a prediction, it's a fact. I'm going to just put it out there, and then we can rewind the clock. I won't predict the date will happen, but I have a difficult time believing that today in this world there isn't a standard to measure the very thing that measures everything else in this world, data. So it's difficult for me coming into this industry where we do an amazing job to help companies move, have access to data, manage data, but not a single person can tell me what does it look like to have good data. And so I believe that will no longer be acceptable, and it's something that you have to be able to quantify and contextualize. And in order for people to be data-driven, they must know if it's actually good in a way that's communicated and consistent in an industry and across the globe. That has to be something that will be in place, and we will do that at Talend.
I love that. More data-driven and being data-driven.
Data health.
Data health. You heard it here first. Mada, what do you have to say?
So for those of you who are looking for companies' ideas, I think there's going to be this trend where I strongly believe that people are not coming back to the office, and I also strongly believe that people need to meet in person. So I think there's going to be this model where companies are going to come together in a lot more offsites and fun ways. We just hired a person, and their sole job is to work with executives and help them bring teams together and do fun events to make sure people build that trust.
What's the name of that role? That's like a new title. Experience coordinator?
I think experience
I don't mean to put you on the
manager or
spot.
something.
We have someone
on the
called
people
Future
team.
of Work. It's our Future of Work person we just hired.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
we're calling
New
it
roles.
burst meetings, if that's similar to just bringing
Yeah,
people
exactly.
together.
Like
Yeah.
to bring people together and help them organize an offsite and like some, like. So I think there's like there's going to be a lot of companies that are. It's very hard, right? Like I did an offsite for my company, and I literally walked around the campus and came up with my own scavenger hunt, and it took me like a day to figure this out. And I wish someone did that for me, but there aren't really a lot of like companies that help you bring smaller teams together. There wasn't really a world where that happened that often, and I think this will happen a lot more. It will be global. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves, and the companies who can solve that problem. I think it's going to be a whole market around it.
Yeah, amazing. Jagger?
First, totally agree with that. I actually did see a few startups that are trying to do like these micro engagement, sort of connecting employees. There's one called Gatho. I forget the other one.
I'm going to go look them up.
Yeah, that's right. There's some good ones. But that connectivity challenge, I think, is going to be where the innovation happens. Like Zoom isn't it. Zoom is great from like 1 to, 6 people, but anything over that is garbage. I shouldn't say that. It's not garbage.
Sorry, Zoom.
It's not ideal. There's room for innovation. And that means that, how do you do it? Is it AR? Like, is this the thing that makes AR actually make sense, where I put on little glasses and all my friends are like, hanging out with me? That's gonna be creepy, but it might be the future. Maybe it's VR. Maybe we're all gonna have like group meetings in Fortnite. Like, who knows how this is gonna work? But and I hate to say the word, but this metaverse thing may not be wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like that may in fact be how we have these mass come togethers in a virtual world.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say it's not possible. Accenture just rolled out all of their new hires, virtual reality.
Yeah.
That's how they're
Yeah.
enabling.
Yeah.
It
I
has
can
to
see
be
it
some
happening.
hybrid. I agree
Some
with
hybrid.
you.
And whoever
Yeah.
figures out, it's going to be a multi-billion. Like that is, if you're looking for a business idea,
Yeah.
solve that problem.
Yeah, solve that problem and also reinvent meetings in terms of the way, we're all gathering together. Absolutely. Thank you, panel.
you.
Amazing. Thank you, audience. Appreciate your attention and look forward to seeing these predictions come true.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you
Thanks.
for having us.